Next up, we have NAFA National Grassroots Committee Chair Tracy Jones, National Trustee Mark Aker, and Pat Raffanello from Raffanello and Associates to discuss the irreplaceable role agents and advisors play advocating for their businesses, their colleagues, and the Main Street consumers they serve. I'll turn the program over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Wes. I appreciate that. And as Wes said, I am joined with Mark Aker, who is currently sitting on the Board of Trustees. He's also a state or national member of our Grassroots team. And I have the one, the only, needs no introduction, Pat Raffanello, who is our consummate counsel for us. So let's just jump right in. I am so excited about today. I'm so excited about what we're talking about. There's this mystique about how to get involved with politics. And hopefully after we talk for the next few minutes here, that's going to be blown out of the water and y'all be just jumping into to this. So let's just get started. So why, how do you get involved with advocacy? So I'm gonna just tell you some stories. We're gonna kind of just, Mark and I are gonna tell you some stories. Pat's gonna jump in and tell you what goes on when he's talking to the legislators down in DC. So how did I get involved? Well, I got to tell you, my dad was always involved with politics. He was, he sat on the Chamber of Commerce. He was on the Board of Adjustments in Florida. And we even as a kid, and this is going to date me, but I remember as a kid standing on street corners holding a Gerald Ford, for president sign, which did afford me as a child to meet President Ford, although as a child I didn't appreciate it. But that's how I got started. My dad always taught us that it's important to be civic-minded and to be involved. And so I've always had a heart for it. And that's how I got involved with it. But Mark, your story is completely different from mine. So I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, first of all, hello, NAFA. I am NAFA proud to be a part of this phenomenal day. This phenomenal lineup of people speaking and hopefully helping you figure out how you can play your part in Grassroots. My first ever board meeting, I was a year and a half old in NAFA as a member and got drug along into the board. And one of the gentlemen that has been a member of 40 plus years of NAFA, his name is Roy Kern, phenomenal man, great leader in our organization. And he said, young man, he said, why are you involved in NAFA? I said, well, I'm involved in NAFA to make more money. I was a scratch agent trying to figure my way into the industry and do what I can to grow my practice. And I really didn't care about advocacy. I didn't care about anything but how I can make sure I survive and pay my bills, really. And he says, well, that's where you're wrong, son. NAFA is all about advocacy. And I said, well, if you didn't want to know my answer, sir, you shouldn't have asked. But today, here I am as a NAFA trustee, having served at the national level for advocacy, because Roy Kern took me under his wing and said, son, here's how you do advocacy, and here's why it's important for us as members of NAFA to do it this way. And he took me on my first few visits with our state representatives here in Missouri, and I caught the bug and have never looked back since. So it doesn't really matter how you get involved. You can hold Gerald Ford presidential signs, or you can be drugged along into your first state meeting. Either way, it's important for all of us to do it because it matters to our clients here that we serve on Main Street America.
Thanks, Mark. So what is Grassroots? Quite frankly, it's just making an impact. And Mark, I'd love to hear your story about how you feel you've made an impact in the industry.
Sure, I can tell you all kinds of good stories, but one of my favorite stories really highlights what NAFA is to our members of NAFA, as well as to our clients that we serve, of the 90 million clients that Kevin mentioned earlier. I was asked by our congressman, Lacey Clay in St. Louis, Missouri, to come play in a golf tournament. I think he only really wanted me to play because of the work that the PAC does, because I might have had a check donation made to the PAC on his behalf from NAFA. But he asked me to play in his golf tournament. And after the golf tournament was over, we were having a social hour, and I was talking to this gentleman who was just super vibrant gentleman, and we just had a good conversation. And about 20 minutes later, Congressman Clay came over and said, thanks us for coming and being there and being part of the golf tournament and supporting him. And to be frank, one of the things I want to highlight for you is our ideologies don't line up exactly. I'm from Southwest Missouri. He's from the inner city in St. Louis. So some of the things he thinks maybe on different policies is different than mine. But I was taught through NAFA that the minute that you become so tied to one side of the aisle, no matter how passionate we can be, the minute you decide you're going to tie into one side of the aisle and not think that anybody on the other side of the aisle, whether you're right or left, donkey or elephant, if you think that nobody else on the other side of the aisle has any good ideas or can do any good, you're ineffective as a legislator, you're ineffective as a political influencer in our world. But Lacey was talking with me, and this gentleman I've been talking to for a little bit walks up. And I noticed they resembled each other a little bit, and the gentleman said, "Lacey, this young man's a future star in NAFA." Little did he know that I'm not that big of a star, but Lacey, and I found out that Lacey was actually his son, the guy I was talking to. And the cool part about it is the legacy they were leaving was that in St. Louis is that his father was a congressman before him. So both the father and the son were congressmen. And Lacey said, or the father said, "Lacey, NAFA is one of the most impactful organizations in the industry of insurance. You have got to listen to this guy. You have to make friends with him. They have 125 years of serving Main Street America, and they're important to us. They support us. And so be friends with this guy because they'll always be friends with you." And so the credibility that NAFA has created from 130 years now of work we've done on Capitol Hill, work we've done with legislators, the work that Diane Boyle and her team have done, lobbying for us on our behalf, is so great. And I got the opportunity to play golf in a golf tournament, and we frequent each other we talk to each other very frequently. When I go to Washington, D.C., he welcomes me with open arms, and we have good laughs about his father and those things. And so that work we've done for 130 years has led us to be able to have influence in the lives of our legislators.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. And I love what you said about the fact that there is no, a Democrat, Republican. It's talking about your bills. And to that end, Pat, I would love for you to chime in on your thoughts on that subject.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's, I think what Mark's story illustrates is that what we do, what you do for your clients, for Main Street America, really is not partisan. It cuts across all aspects of society. We are important. What you do is important to Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And I think it's easy, if you've heard me speak before, I'm fairly partisan, but NAFA has smartly put together a team that can reach Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And I think Mark's point about the difference between Southeast Missouri and the inner city, St. Louis, points out that, yeah, there may be members of Congress that are not going to be our champions. There may even be some members. You might have a member who doesn't think highly of what we do. It's important that we still engage with them. You really want to have as many champions as we can, but you also want to be able to reach out to those that disagree with us for two reasons. One, you get to lower their intensity, and perhaps you actually bring them along. So I think it's important that you don't decide that, well, my member of Congress has never helped us, it's never gonna help us. It's a long game, stay with it.
Oh, thank you, Pat. I appreciate that. And you know, building relationships is one of the key things that you can do when it comes to really getting to know and really getting your foot in the door with the legislators. I work on a lot of the campaigns with the legislators in my districts, both on the state level and on the federal level. Actually, one of the legislators on the state level, his son and daughter-in-law go to my very small church, and I saw him at church one day and got to talk to him there. And now every time I see him, we talk about family first and business second. But not only that, you can also build other relationships. A few years back, we were trying to get a bill passed, and quite frankly, at the time, Representative Biggs, who is now down in DC, he was the president of the Senate in Arizona. And we were trying to get this bill passed, and thankfully, a friend of mine that knew him brought me in to have a meeting with him, and I talked to him about the bill. Guys, he was dead set against the bill. Didn't like it. Just didn't like it. And nothing I said was going to change his mind. But after our conversation, he said he'd remain neutral. Well, a few months later, now it's the representatives have all passed it, and now it's in the Senate, and he held on to it. But I went in there, I kept going in there, I was respectful, I was pleasant, I was nice, joked around. Hey, what can we do to get this happen? He would give me a hoop to jump through. I'd jump through that hoop, go back in. Now can you do it? He'd give me another hoop. Did it annoy the heck out of me? Yeah, it did. But you know what? He never saw that. He just saw someone who was pleasant and nice and just went along with it. And in the end, he respected us enough to put it on the floor and a vote, and we got it passed. Well, a couple of years down the road, now he's down in Congress, and I am able to, thankfully, get a meeting with him anytime I want, because he remembers the lady who was patient enough and nice enough to, you know, to respect him and respect his position and his thoughts on it. So there are different ways to make to have those relationships. Mark, I would love to hear, you know, I know you have a story too about Representative Smith, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's right. It was Congressman Smith is from the southeast part of the state of Missouri, and I live in the southwest part, but I grew up in the southeast, so I kind of relate with that that demographic. But we were there in Washington, D.C. And during this time of the year, and we had a meeting with him, and he was a freshman congressman, so he's young and vibrant and full of vigor and ready to shake things up. We were speaking about how things were going, and I was introduced as the NAFA, at that time, NAFA Missouri president. And he said, "My gosh, you're president of NAFA Missouri?" And I said, he said, "At such a young age, how in the world?" And I said, "Well, with all due respect, Congressman, you're a freaking congressman, and we're the same age." And so, and Pat will point out that I have way more hair than Jason, but probably later. But
thank you for sharing that publicly.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll enjoy watching this. I'm sure we'll just send it to him. But long story short, that began a relationship with him. We could relate, same age. He cared about what I cared about, and some of the same, you know, stories of he grew up in Salem, Missouri, and he actually had an insurance license for 6 months and failed. Another good story to tell about Jason Smith. We've become pretty good buddies, and over just bonding in that scenario. And one of the cool things, I've had breakfast with him at Panera Bread. Donald Trump was supposed to come when he was campaigning to Cape Girardeau, which is in his district. And something happened where he couldn't go to Cape Girardeau. And he found out that morning I was meeting with him that he wasn't coming. He said, "Well, you'll be really happy. He's going to Springfield instead of Cape." And Cape has 14,000 people in it. And Springfield has 230,000, still a big metropolitan city. But anyway, Jason was pretty bummed, and I had to soothe his heart and give him a pack check that same morning. But one of the cool things about it is he's called me personally and asked me questions about insurance laws. And he had a question on licensing and that process and how we do it in Missouri. And he also, one day when we were in DC a couple of meetings ago, we were talking about the Secure Act. And one of the coolest things to do as a member of NAFA is to go represent a bill. And we were talking about this bill and how it would allow small businesses to be able to offer more robust investment programs for small business owners to offer to their employees. I told them the story of this woman that lives in Cape Girardeau in his district that's a client of mine. She never made more than $32,000 a year, and Procter & Gamble was her company she worked for, and she was able to put money back into her 401k or whatever investment options she was using in her employer. And when she retired, she had $1.1 million. She lived in a small little house of about 800 square feet. She had 5 cows. And I told the story to Jason about how this woman, who was not rich in the Main Street America's public eye of $32,000 a year, but when she retired a millionaire because of what Procter & Gamble could provide for her. And that's why small businesses like ours, the ones we serve, of the 90 million people we serve, should be able to do the same. And he took that story and put it out on social media, from Twitter to LinkedIn to whatever other, Facebook, probably on Snapchat. But he used that story to tell the story of why the Secure Act was such a good bill to get passed for Main Street America. So you never know, from hair loss to age to whatever things you might relate with that congressman or senator, or even that state legislator, right? That local representative or the state senator that you might know in your hometown. Those relationships matter, and they're impactful for our legislators to carry out what we want carried out for our clients, which are their constituents.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Pat, I know that, so often I think people kind of are frozen to do anything with advocacy because they're so afraid that they're not going to have all the answers. But for you all who do have all the answers, or most of them anyway, the relationship that we form is what's important. And I would love for you to speak on that if you could.
Sure. It's like when this is selling. You folks do that every day. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to be part of this organization. It's how you make your living. So when you're going to Congress, you're just selling a concept, and most of the times not nearly as complicated as the products that you sell every day. So it's important to just go in, talk about what you know. And if you do get a question that you don't know the answer to, the easy thing is to say, I'm not sure about that. Give me a day or two and I'll get back to you. We'll provide the answers. The NAFA staff can answer the questions for you, put it into a language that the member of Congress can understand. But there's no harm and no shame at all in admitting that, okay, well, that's a question I hadn't considered, but let's talk about what I do know. That's an easy thing. Also, Trace, I thought there was something really important about your story that I want to get back to with Congressman, or the leader, Biggs, now Congressman, is, he was against the bill. Now, because of charm and intelligence, Tracy was able to at least bring him to neutral. That doesn't always happen, but it's still important to do that, because I learned when I was first came back to Washington after working in the States, I was the director of federal affairs of the National Rifle Association. And my idea was, I want your vote every time, and I'm going to work hard to get it. But if I can't get your vote this time, I want it next time. And what Tracy did is exactly that. They developed at least the respect that this woman wasn't going to get pushed back, but she was going to stand her ground and tell me the facts as she saw them. The alternative is what I ran into when I first came to the NRA. There was Senator David Pryor, who was from Arkansas. That's a fairly solid gun state. And he'd have been pretty good, but he had crossed the line with some of our more vehement members, shall I say. And they went after Senator Pryor. Instead of saying, look, we can disagree on this, we'll get you on the next one. When the Brady bill came up, Senator Pryor had a minor heart problem and was in the hospital. When asked if he was going to come in and vote, he said, I will crawl over broken glass to vote against the NRA. We don't want that. We want them to say, okay, let's try to get together on this next vote.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Pat. That's so perfect. So Maggie had asked us to answer this question, and I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite questions to answer, and that is, why advocate? Why do you advocate? And there's 1,000 things I could tell you, but probably the one that is most recent and is most near and dear to my heart is the fiduciary bill. As you all know, NAFA pushed really hard on that bill. We got out a lot of stuff that would have just devastated our industry. I am a insurance licensed, and I am also an investment advisor, and I'm a third-party administrator, which means I do the tax documents and the legal documents for qualified plans. And when the fiduciary bill came out, my broker-dealer came to me and said, you can't do both. You have to choose one or the other. I immediately started contacting other broker-dealers because 50% of my income is TPA and 50% of my income is investments and insurance. And so I couldn't give up either one of those without having a devastating effect on my business. So I immediately started calling other broker-dealers and was getting the exact same answer from every other broker-dealer that I was talking to. Guys, it was going to completely affect my business. I had started looking for someone to buy the TPA side, had lined up some things. And in the meantime, NAFA was busy working in the Fifth Circuit Court. And thankfully, before I pulled that trigger, and it wasn't too long before I pulled that trigger, it was thrown out and I was able to keep both sides of my business. That is one example, folks. That is one example of my business being saved, quite frankly, because of NAFA. So you want to know why I advocate? I advocate for my clients. I advocate for my business. I advocate for you all. So it is near and dear to my heart. I want to throw it over to you, Mark, and I want to ask you the same question. Why?
Why I advocate is pretty simple. The first reason is because I believe it's our responsibility as members of NAFA, and members represent 90 million clients across the country on Main Street America, to stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us for 130 years. We don't have what we have at NAFA because of no people that don't want to work. We have to put the work in to do what we've done for 130 years. And so it's my responsibility to carry that out. And I take that very, very seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. Pat, do you have any examples of how the relationships that have been built and how that has affected lawmakers' decisions?
Yeah, you know, I think the question, why advocate, pretty simple. Does your livelihood matter to you? Does your business matter to you? Does it matter to your clients? If it does, why would you let someone else develop the policies that regulate your business? If you don't come out and advocate for yourself, for your clients, for the industry, someone else will. Much as I like to think I'm a unique and valuable character, there are probably 15,000 other registered lobbyists in DC, and everybody is vying for the time of the members who are making decisions. If you're not there talking to them, then someone else will be, and they will be providing the substance that will that will help the member make a decision. We need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just saw John Wheeler on a chat said, if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu. And that is very true. And it's one thing that, you know, we say in DC. It's also what we, you know, you need to know at your state. You know, people think, oh, I don't need to go to that state day on the Hill. Yeah, you do. Because if you're not making a presence, you will be forgotten. Trust me. It is a very fast pace up on the Hill, whether it's in DC or in your own state. And it's really important to be a part of every single event that you can possibly be. You've got to be down there and you've got to be in front of them all the time, all the time. All right, real quick. I wanted to jump into the participant in district and you know, getting to know your district staffers. So I wanted to throw that at Mark and have you tell your story about the veteran.
Sure. You know, one of the cool things about what we do is you don't just get to meet a congressman or senator or a state representative or a state senator. You get to meet people they work with, right? They're staffers or people that work underneath them in certain portions of what they do. And I've been very fortunate with my Congressman Billy Long to have met many of his staffers along of my, I think, 11 or 13, I believe, trips to Washington, D.C., as well as here in our local state representation of our legislators. And I can tell you two of our congressmen's staffers have gone on to be state reps in my area, in Nixa, Missouri, and Ozark, Missouri. And so I'm getting invited to their golf tournaments. I know them well. One of them is my client. And so you're not just talking to Congressman Billy Long, you're talking to his staffers as well. And that makes a big difference and allows me the opportunity. Congressman Long has volunteered he was an auctioneer by trade and has volunteered to use his auctioneer skills at my local nonprofit that I run. And it's been a very, very cool experience. But I think what I want to highlight as we wrap up our session this morning, or this afternoon for some of you on the East Coast and whatnot, is, you know, when I was young in NAFA, Roy Kern took me under his wing and showed me the importance of local representation of NAFA to our state reps and legislators. But at the national level, Ed Anderson, who's a hero amongst NAFA national members, everyone knows Ed. He was in Tracy's position a few years ago as the national grassroots committee leader, and he drugged me to Washington, D.C. Pretty much literally. I think he even made the state of Missouri pay for it or something. I don't even know if it cost me money or anything at all. But he drugged me to Washington, D.C. And I want to challenge you today. I want to challenge you. If you're like me when I was 27 or so, 28, and Ed drugged me to D.C. If you're like me and you're looking at how do you get involved, you heard how Tracy got involved, you heard how I've gotten involved. I would challenge you to find that veteran that like Ed Anderson, the hero that he is, to get me involved and ask them how you get involved. And I guarantee you, no one in NAFA is going to turn you away. And as you can see on your screen there, if you have questions about, if you don't know how to get connected to somebody that can help you get involved as a grassroots committee person or just a grassroots person going to represent your clients like we're talking about today, email there at advocacy@nafa.org or find my cell or find me on Facebook, and I'll gladly point you in the right direction to do that. My second challenge is those of you who are veterans, and I mean veterans that you've been to Washington, D.C. one time as a veteran to me. Grab a future Mark Aker. Grab a Mark Aker and show them how impactful what we do is and the credibility we've built over 130 years and how important we are, as you've heard all of us say, and you've heard John's example of us being on the menu. We don't want to be on the menu. We need vibrant young people to stand on our shoulders. Weird to say that as a 39-year-old, but stand on our shoulders and do what we've been doing for 130 years. So find somebody to drag along to DC with you, or drag along to your state capitol, or drag along to a local district meeting, or if you're a young person, find that veteran to help you get involved like we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Pat, we got about a minute. Anything final words you want to leave?
Yeah, I would just say that one of the real values of spending time with your members, with the members of Congress and the legislature, is getting to know your audience, right? Same thing that you do when you go to a prospect. You try to learn about them so that you can pitch a product that makes sense for them and sell it in a way that will be receptive. And I've got one short story about actually a senator to senator lobbying. Senator Langford was talking to Senator Romney and to Tracy's Senator Kristen Sinema about a budget proposal he had, and trying to get a way to make that the federal budget would come into balance. One of the ways that the members have tried to do that in the past is to say, okay, if we don't get a budget, no pay. And Langford said, well, that doesn't work because most senators can afford to go without their paycheck. And Kristen Sinema said, that's not true. If I can't afford to be, if I don't get paid, I'm going to have to move into your house, pointing to Senator Romney. Senator Romney said, which house? So, know your audience. You can sell it better that way. But thank you for coming to this webinar, and look forward to seeing you in Washington.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate that, and very true. Definitely Advocacy and Action Center. You know, one of the ways that when it came to the fiduciary bill, one of the ways that we were able to get that thing passed, one of my Congressman Schweikert, who you're going to be hearing from after this, along with some others, he and I have a relationship because I helped on his campaign. That's how I started to get to know him. And because of that, they flew me into DC to meet with him before the tax laws came, the new tax bill came out, and I was able to talk to him about some of the different concerns that we had, and it made a difference. So, but please, I would love for everybody to go to the Advocacy and Action Center. Please read about that. Get involved. Guys, we all started somewhere. We all started not knowing what we were doing. I can promise you, actually, Pat was the one who took me around for the first time in DC to, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was scared to death until he walked up, and then I thought, oh, thank God somebody's here that knows what they're going to be talking about. So we start somewhere, and once you start, trust me, you'll never want to jump out again. I also want to plug the Congressional Conference, which for 2021, obviously we're missing it this year, but next year it's going to be May 25th and 26th in DC. Don't miss it. If you've never been, I'm telling you, you will not regret coming. You'll love it. So up next, we're going to be hearing from members of Congress, including, as I just said a minute ago, someone that is near and dear to my heart, who is Congressman Schweikert, as well as a few others that you will recognize. I do appreciate you all being on here, and if there's one thing that I would leave you with, it is that you don't have to know a single thing about talking to legislators. You don't have to have had any kind of experience or any kind of education. We will supply all that for you. We won't throw you out to the wolves. Trust me, we will go with you. You will be well prepared before talking to anybody. In-district meetings are so important, guys. They are so much more relaxed in their in-district meetings than they are in DC. So a lot of people kind of blow those off. Trust me, they are so much more important, because when they're in their own state, they're relaxed. They're more open to discussion. They have more time for you. So really start it with in-district meetings, do campaigns. Trust me, I can't tell you how many envelopes I've licked in my life trying to, get to know some of the legislators. It does make a difference. So we appreciate it. We thank you so much for your time, and make it a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.